The hallways of Westridge Academy always felt too narrow to Jasmine Williams. Not because they actually were. The school building was enormous with high ceilings and wide corridors that echoed with footsteps. But because of the stairs. 2 weeks at her new school, and Jasmine still felt like an animal at the zoo. It wasn't just that she was one of only 7 black students in the entire sophomore class. It was the way people looked at her, as if trying to figure out why she was there. The unspoken question in their eyes, how did you get in here? The truth was simple. Her father's job had moved them across the country, and her mother had fought hard to get Jasmine into this prestigious school with its fancy music program and high college acceptance rate. "This is your ticket," her mother had said, squeezing her hand outside the principal's office on the first day. Jasmine pulled her textbooks closer to her chest as she made her way to 5th period. Music appreciation with Mr. Peterson, the class everyone warned her about. He stuck in the 1800s, one friendly girl had told her during lunch on her first day. Thinks nothing good was created after Mozart died. Jasmine slipped into the classroom just as the bell rang and took her usual seat in the back corner. She preferred it there. Less visible, less likely to be called on. Mr. Peterson stood at the front of the room, a tall man with graying temples and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. His tweed jacket had elbow patches like he'd ordered it from a catalog titled Stereotypical Teacher Attire. "Today," he announced, writing on the whiteboard with a blue marker, "we continue our exploration of the great composers and their enduring influence on modern music." Jasmine opened her notebook, keeping her eyes down. She'd learned that eye contact in Mr. Peterson's class was dangerous. It might be interpreted as interest, which could lead to being called on. "Before we begin," Mr. Peterson said, turning to face the class, "I'd like to address some comments I overheard in the hallway." He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Someone suggested we should spend time discussing," his mouth tightened slightly, "rap music in this class." A few students glanced toward Jasmine. She hadn't said anything about rap. She hadn't said much of anything to anyone. "Let me be clear," Mr. Peterson continued. "This course covers music. Real music. Not noise with words shouted over it." The room fell uncomfortably silent. Jasmine kept her expression neutral, though she felt heat rising in her cheeks. She'd dealt with teachers like this before. The best strategy was to become invisible. "Now," Mr. Peterson clapped his hands together, "let's discuss Niccolo Paganini, one of the most technically accomplished violinists in history." He dimmed the lights and clicked through a PowerPoint presentation, showing old portraits and manuscripts. Jasmine actually found this interesting, though she'd never admit it. The way Mr. Peterson described Paganini's innovative techniques and the rumors that he'd sold to the devil to play so well, it was the kind of story that stuck with you. Paganini's 24 Caprices are considered among the most difficult pieces ever, written for solo violin, Mr. Peterson explained, playing a short audio clip that filled the room with frantic, beautiful notes. "Most violinists spend decades mastering even one of these compositions." He stopped the music abruptly. "Can anyone tell me what makes this piece so challenging?" The usual hands went up, the same 3 students who always volunteered. But today, Mr. Peterson's gaze drifted to the back corner of the room. "Ms. Williams," he said, her name sounding foreign on his tongue. "You've been very quiet since joining us. Perhaps you have thoughts on Paganini's technical innovations?" Jasmine straightened in her chair. "I think it's the double stops and left-hand pizzicato," she said quietly, "and the way he jumps between positions." Mr. Peterson's eyebrows rose slightly, surprise flashing across his face before settling back into his usual expression of mild disdain. "Correct terminology, at least. Have you studied violin, Ms. Williams?" Before she could answer, Tyler from the lacrosse team snickered. "Yeah, right. Mr. Peterson should have reprimanded Tyler, a good teacher would have." Instead, his lips curled into something between a smile and a smirk. "Actually," he said, walking toward the storage cabinet at the side of the classroom, "I think we have an opportunity for a practical demonstration." Jasmine's stomach dropped as Mr. Peterson unlocked the cabinet and removed a violin case. The class stirred with interest. "We keep this for demonstrations," Mr. Peterson explained, opening the case to reveal a honey-colored violin nestled in dark blue velvet. "Not our finest instrument, but it serves its purpose." He lifted it carefully along with a bow and walked directly to Jasmine's desk. Perhaps Ms. Williams would honor us by demonstrating some of Paganini's techniques that she so correctly identified. It wasn't a question. The violin and bow were already being extended toward her. Behind Mr. Peterson, Tyler was making exaggerated grimaces of anticipated pain, as if preparing for terrible sounds. 24 pairs of eyes were fixed on Jasmine. She could feel sweat forming on her palms as she slowly accepted the instrument. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd been avoiding. The kind that singled her out, that made her different, that reminded everyone she didn't belong. "Any piece you'd like to attempt?" Mr. Peterson said with exaggerated generosity. "Even Twinkle Twinkle would be acceptable for our purposes," someone giggled. Jasmine looked down at the violin in her hands. It wasn't a great instrument, definitely not what she was used to, but it seemed well enough maintained. She ran her thumb over the fine tuners, testing their resistance. "I'm waiting, Ms. Williams," Mr. Peterson said, the patience in his voice wearing thin. "Or should we return to the lecture?" Jasmine thought of her mother's words that morning as she dropped her off. "Keep your head high today, baby. Remember who you are." With a deep breath, Jasmine stood. The classroom seemed to expand around her, the fluorescent lights suddenly too bright. She tucked the violin under her chin, feeling its familiar weight against her collarbone. This part at least felt like home. Mr. Peterson stepped back, arms crossed, watching her with the satisfied expression of someone about to witness a train wreck. Tyler pretended to cover his ears. Another boy mimicked playing a violin with exaggerated, jerky movements. Jasmine closed her eyes. She adjusted her grip on the bow, feeling its balance. Then, without warning, she attacked the strings. The opening notes of Paganini's Caprice No. 24 filled the room, precise, confident, and blindingly fast. Her fingers flew across the fingerboard with practiced precision, each note ringing clear as she navigated the complex runs and arpeggios that had intimidated violinists for centuries. She didn't need sheet music. She'd memorized this piece 2 years ago for a competition in Chicago. Through half-opened eyes, she saw Mr. Peterson's face transform from smug expectation to confusion, then disbelief, then something approaching horror. His mouth hung slightly open, his arms no longer crossed but hanging limply at his sides. The other students weren't much different. Tyler's mocking grin had disappeared entirely. The girl who sat next to him, Rebecca or Rachel, Jasmine couldn't remember, was filming with her phone, her expression stunned. Jasmine didn't care. She was somewhere else now. The classroom had vanished, replaced by the familiar void that formed whenever she played, a space where nothing existed but her, the violin, and the music flowing between them. Her bow danced across the strings as she navigated the piece's trickiest passage, a series of double and triple stops that required perfect intonation. On her own violin, she could have made it sing even better, but even on this school instrument, she coaxed out sounds that filled the room with impossible beauty. As she approached the final variations, Jasmine opened her eyes fully. Mr. Peterson had backed up against his desk, gripping its edge with white knuckles. The entire class was motionless, as if someone had pressed pause on the scene. Only Jasmine moved, her right arm a blur as she built toward the piece's thunderous conclusion. With a final triumphant stroke, she finished. The last note hung in the air like a question nobody knew how to answer. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence. Then someone in the back whispered, "Holy crap." It broke the spell. A wave of confused murmuring swept through the classroom. Someone started clapping, then stopped when nobody joined in. The whole situation was too bizarre for a normal reaction. Jasmine carefully lowered the violin from her chin. Her heart was pounding, but her face remained calm as she carefully placed the instrument back in its case, making sure to loosen the bow before returning it to its holder. Mr. Peterson hadn't moved or spoken. He seemed to be processing what had just happened, recalculating every assumption he'd made when she walked into his classroom on the first day. Jasmine returned to her seat without a word, pulled her notebook closer and picked up her pen. She could feel the weight of stares even heavier than before, but differently now. The question in their eyes had changed. No one spoke until the bell rang 5 minutes later. As students filed out in unusual silence, many glancing back at her, Jasmine packed her book slowly. She wasn't in a hurry. Mr. Peterson remained at his desk, shuffling papers without actually looking at them. As Jasmine passed him on her way to the door, he cleared his throat. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I wasn't aware you had musical training. Jasmine paused in the doorway. She could have said many things in that moment. About assumptions. About the countless competitions she'd won since she was 6 years old. About the scholarship offers from music conservatories that had already started arriving at her home. Instead, she simply said, "You didn't ask, sir," and walked into the hallway, letting the door close behind her. Word traveled fast at Westridge Academy. By the time Jasmine reached her locker after music appreciation class, 3 people she'd never spoken to before smiled at her in the hallway. A senior girl with blue-tipped hair gave her a thumbs up as she passed. "Is that her?" Jasmine heard someone whisper behind her back. She kept her eyes forward, turning the combination lock with practiced fingers. Inside her locker, everything was meticulously organized. Textbooks arranged by class period, a small magnetic mirror, and a photo of her family at her last recital. Her fingers lingered on the picture for a moment before she exchanged her music textbook for pre-calculus. "Excuse me." Jasmine turned to find Rebecca, she was now certain that was her name, standing there with wide eyes and an uncertain smile. She was still holding her phone. "That was incredible," Rebecca said. "I've never heard anyone play like that in real life." Jasmine nodded a thanks, unsure what else to say. This kind of attention made her uncomfortable. At her old school, her violin playing had made her the talented black girl, a label that had followed her everywhere, defining her before people even knew her name. "I posted the video in the school group chat," Rebecca continued, oblivious to Jasmine's discomfort. "Everyone's talking about it. Maddie thinks you should try out for the orchestra. They're preparing for the winter showcase and—" "I need to get to math," Jasmine interrupted, closing her locker with a soft click. "I can't be late." Rebecca looked disappointed but nodded. "Sure, yeah. Maybe we can talk later?" Jasmine gave a non-committal shrug and headed to class, conscious of the stares following her down the hallway. This was exactly what she hadn't wanted. The violin was hers, her private joy, her escape. Now it had become public property, something for everyone else to discuss and dissect. Pre-calculus passed in a blur. Jasmine took notes mechanically, not really absorbing the lesson on logarithmic functions. Her mind kept replaying Mr. Peterson's face as she'd played, the transformation from smug superiority to shock. She shouldn't have played so well. She should have fumbled, played something simple. Now everyone would have expectations. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Normally, she never checked messages during class, but when it buzzed a second time, she discreetly slipped it out. 5 text notifications lit up her screen. 3 were from her mother. "Call me when you can. The school just called. We need to talk about what happened in your music class today." Jasmine's stomach tightened. The other messages were from unknown numbers, students who had somehow found her contact information. "Your playing was sick. Orchestra meets Thursdays after school. Come, hey, it's Rebecca from music. Here's my number. Let's hang." She turned her phone off and shoved it back in her pocket, heart beating faster. It was happening again, just like at Douglas High. The attention, the expectations, the loss of control over her own narrative. When the final bell rang at 3:15, Jasmine gathered her things quickly. Maybe she could make it to the buses before Ms. Williams. Mr. Reed, her pre-calc teacher, beckoned her to his desk as other students filed out. "Ms. Rivera would like to see you in the music office." Jasmine's heart sank. Ms. Rivera was the head of the music department, a formidable woman with a reputation for pushing talented students toward competitions and conservatories. "Now?" Jasmine asked, already knowing the answer. Mr. Reed nodded, handing her a hall pass. She said, "It's important." The music wing was on the opposite side of the building. Jasmine walked slowly, delaying the inevitable. Through the windows of the practice rooms, she could see students hunched over instruments, some glancing up as she passed. Had they all seen the video already? The music office door was open. Ms. Rivera sat behind a desk cluttered with sheet music and concert programs. She was younger than Jasmine had expected, maybe in her late 30s, with curly hair pulled back in a loose bun and rectangular glasses that magnified her intense gaze. "Ah, Jasmine," she said, looking up. "Please come in." Jasmine stepped inside, clutching her backpack straps. On the wall behind Ms. Rivera hung framed photos of student orchestras and certificates of achievement. A sleek cello leaned in one corner. "I'm guessing you know why I wanted to talk to you." Ms. Rivera said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Jasmine sat, placing her backpack on the floor beside her. Mr. Peterson's class. Mr. Peterson's class, Ms. Rivera repeated, her tone unreadable. Where apparently you performed Paganini's Caprice No. 24 at a level that most college conservatory students would envy. She leaned forward slightly. And yet there's nothing in your file about musical training. No mention of it during your enrollment. It wasn't a question, but Jasmine felt compelled to respond. It didn't seem important for school. Ms. Rivera's eyebrows rose. Not important? Jasmine, do you know what kind of music program we have here? My mom just wanted me in a good academic school. Ms. Rivera studied her for a moment, then turned to her computer. I took the liberty of doing some research after seeing Rebecca Chen's video. Your previous school was Douglas High in Philadelphia, correct? Jasmine nodded. And before that, you attended the Philadelphia Youth Music Program on Saturdays. Another nod. Where at age 12 you were a finalist in their annual concerto competition. Ms. Rivera looked up from her screen. And at 14 you won the Eastern Regional Strings Competition with a performance of... She checked her notes. Sibelius Violin Concerto in D minor. Jasmine stared at her hands in her lap. That was before we moved. And you didn't think this was worth mentioning when you enrolled at a school with one of the strongest music programs in the state? Ms. Rivera's voice wasn't accusatory, just confused. Jasmine remained silent, unsure how to explain. How could she tell this woman that music had become complicated for her? That at Douglas her playing had made her simultaneously too visible and invisible? That teachers had paraded her around as proof of the school's success while peers either resented her or expected her to represent all black classical musicians? Mr. Peterson's behavior today was inappropriate, Ms. Rivera said, shifting topics. I want you to know that. He had no right to put you on the spot that way. Jasmine looked up, surprised by the validation. We've had conversations about his teaching approach before, Ms. Rivera continued, removing her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. This incident will be addressed. But right now I'm more concerned about you. I'm fine, Jasmine said automatically. Are you? Ms. Rivera put her glasses back on. Because a student with your talent should be first chair in our orchestra, preparing for conservatory auditions, performing in our showcase concerts. Instead, you've been hiding in plain sight for 2 weeks. The word hiding stung, even if it was accurate. I just wanted to be normal, Jasmine said quietly. To just be a student, not the violin girl or that black classical musician or whatever other box people want to put me in. Understanding dawned on Ms. Rivera's face. She was quiet for a moment, then said, May I tell you a story, Jasmine? Without waiting for a response, she continued. When I was about your age, I was the only Latina in my high school orchestra. Every time we performed, people would tell my parents how surprising it was to see someone like me play Dvořák so beautifully. She made air quotes with her fingers, as if being Puerto Rican and playing classical music were somehow contradictory. Jasmine looked at her with new interest. I nearly quit, Ms. Rivera admitted. I was tired of being the example, the exception, the novelty. She gestured to the cello in the corner. But I realized that if I quit, I'd be allowing other people to define my relationship with music, and music was too important to me to let that happen. The room fell quiet. Outside, they could hear the muffled sounds of a trumpet practicing scales. I'm not saying your experience is the same as mine, Ms. Rivera clarified. Everyone's journey is their own. But I recognize the look in your eyes, the desire to be seen for who you are, not what you represent. Jasmine's throat felt tight. This was the first conversation at Westridge that felt real, that acknowledged the complexity of her situation. What happened in Mr. Peterson's class today wasn't just about music, Ms. Rivera said. It was about assumptions and prejudice. He tried to use the violin to embarrass you because he made assumptions about who you are and what you're capable of. Jasmine nodded, relief flooding through her at being understood. But here's the thing about talent. Jasmine, Ms. Rivera continued, her voice softer now. It's yours. Completely yours. How you share it or whether you share it is your choice. No one can take that from you. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, Jasmine felt something loosen in her chest. We have orchestra rehearsals on Thursdays after school, Ms. Rivera said, her tone becoming more casual. No pressure, but you'd be welcome to sit in. Just to observe if that's all you want. I'll think about it, Jasmine said and meant it. That's all I ask. Ms. Rivera handed her a piece of paper with the rehearsal schedule. And Jasmine, for what it's worth, what you did today in Mr. Peterson's class took courage. Sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice is simply to excel, unapologetically in the face of it. Jasmine tucked the schedule into her backpack and stood. Thank you, she said, unsure what else to add. As she turned to leave, Ms. Rivera added, Oh, and if you're interested, I have connections at Juilliard. You're playing today? It's at that level. Outside in the empty hallway, Jasmine leaned against the wall, processing everything. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. She took it out. 5 more notifications, including a text from her mother asking where she was. With a deep breath, Jasmine turned her phone back off and headed toward the buses. She had a lot to think about. For the first time since moving, she found herself wondering where her violin case was packed among the boxes still stacked in their garage. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to unpack it again. The Williams family dinner table had always been a place of honest conversation. Tonight was no exception, though the topic had Jasmine picking at her food more than eating it. I just don't understand why you kept this from your teachers, her father said, serving himself another helping of pot roast. You've worked too hard to hide your talent, Jasmine. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. David, we agreed to listen first. Jasmine appreciated the intervention. Her father meant well, but he hadn't been the one sitting in that classroom with 24 sets of eyes drilling into her. I wasn't hiding anything, Jasmine said finally. I just didn't bring it up. The school called me today, her mother said. Your music teacher, Mr. Peterson, has been placed on administrative review. And the department head, Ms. Rivera? She wants to discuss scholarship opportunities. Jasmine put down her fork. What, why would she call about scholarships already? Her parents exchanged a look that Jasmine couldn't quite interpret. Because someone posted a video of you playing, her younger brother piped up, mouth half full of mashed potatoes. It's got like thousands of views. Anthony. Her mother shot him a warning look. What video? Jasmine's voice came out sharper than she intended. Who posted a video? Anthony shrugged. Some girl from your school. All my friends were talking about it. Prodigy puts racist teacher in his place, that's what they're calling it. Jasmine felt the blood drain from her face. Show me. Despite her mother's protests about devices at the dinner table, Anthony pulled out his phone and passed it to her. There it was, Rebecca's recording, but now on YouTube with a provocative title and over 12,000 views. The comments section was a battleground of opinions ranging from praise for her playing to debates about classroom dynamics and race. I never wanted this, Jasmine whispered, pushing the phone away. Honey, her mother began. This doesn't have to be a bad thing. You played beautifully. People are impressed. They're not impressed, Mom. They're entertained. Jasmine stood up abruptly. It's like those viral videos of kids who can sing like Whitney Houston or whatever. I'm just today's internet curiosity. Her father's expression softened. That's not true, Jazz. Your playing speaks for itself. You've worked years for that level of skill. But that's not why it's getting views. It's getting views because people love watching black girls prove racist teachers wrong. She struggled to find the right word. It's performing. And I'm tired of performing for people. The kitchen fell silent except for the soft tick of the wall clock. Jasmine's mother got up and wrapped her in a hug that Jasmine neither returned nor rejected. You don't have to perform for anyone, her mother said quietly. But don't let other people's perceptions rob you of something you love. Later that night, Jasmine sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop open, scrolling through the comments on the video. Most were supportive, but many missed the point entirely. Some praised her for showing him up, as if that had been her intention. Others criticized her for not smiling or acknowledging the applause she couldn't even remember hearing in the moment. A notification popped up on her screen. An email from Ms. Rivera. Jasmine, I hope you're doing well after today's events. I wanted to let you know that Mr. Peterson and I have had a lengthy conversation about what happened in class. He acknowledges his behavior was inappropriate and has requested to apologize to you personally. While I normally would encourage such reconciliation, I wanted to check with you first. You're under no obligation to accept his apology or meet with him if you're uncomfortable doing so. On a separate note, I've spoken with Principal Hargrove about fast-tracking your audition for the orchestra, if you're interested. Thursday's rehearsal is still open for you to observe. But there's also a place for you if you'd like to bring your violin and join in. Your talent is exceptional, but your choices remain your own. Best regards. Ms. Rivera. Jasmine read the email twice, then closed her laptop without replying. She walked to her window and looked out at the unfamiliar neighborhood, still strange to her after only a month in this new city. The streetlights had just come on, casting pools of yellow on the quiet street. Her phone buzzed with another text. She'd been getting them all evening, mostly from numbers she didn't recognize, students who had somehow found her contact info. This one was from Rebecca. Hey Jasmine, I'm so sorry about the video going viral. I only shared it with a few people, and then someone put it on YouTube. I should have asked first. Can we talk tomorrow? I feel terrible. Jasmine put the phone down without answering. She wasn't ready to talk to anyone from school yet. Instead, she went to the still unpacked boxes stacked in the corner of her room and began opening them, searching for something specific. In the third box, beneath layers of carefully wrapped clothes, she found it, her violin case. The familiar weight of it in her hands brought a rush of conflicting emotions. Inside was her real violin, not the school's mediocre instrument, but her own. A gift from her grandfather on her 10th birthday. He'd saved for years to buy it for her, believing in her talent long before any competitions or awards. Jasmine ran her fingers over the polished wood, feeling the small nick near the bridge that gave it character. This violin knew her in a way that no person at Westridge Academy did. It had been her confidant through middle school angst, her first heartbreak, the loneliness of being different. She tightened the bow and lifted the violin to her shoulder, not playing yet, just holding it. The familiar posture felt like coming home. A soft knock at her door interrupted the moment. Jazz? Her father's voice. Can I come in? Yeah, she said, lowering the violin. He entered and sat on the edge of her bed, eyes going to the instrument in her hands. I haven't seen that in a while. I missed it, she admitted. Her father nodded, understanding in his eyes. Your mother and I have been talking. Whatever you decide about school, the orchestra, the video, all of it, we're behind you. If you want to switch schools again, we can make that happen. Jasmine considered this. The thought of starting over somewhere else where no one had seen the video was tempting. But something Ms. Rivera had said kept coming back to her. Sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice is simply to excel, unapologetically in the face of it. I don't think I want to leave, she said slowly, surprising herself. At least not yet. Her father looked relieved. Good, because running doesn't solve the problem. And staying does? Jasmine challenged. No, he admitted. But it gives you the chance to rewrite the narrative. Right now, you're the girl in the viral video, but you could be so much more if you choose to be. Jasmine thought about this as she absent-mindedly plucked a G string. I'm not sure what I want to be there. That's okay. Her father stood. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. After he left, Jasmine picked up her violin again and began to play softly, not Paganini this time, but a simple folk tune her grandfather had taught her. The melody was uncomplicated but beautiful, rising and falling like a human voice. She played until her fingertips remembered their calluses, until the tension in her shoulders released, until the music was no longer about proving anything to anyone. She played for herself, the way she used to before competitions and expectations, before becoming the talented one or the exception. By the time she finished, her decision was made. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at school earlier than usual, violin case in hand. The hallways were nearly empty, just a few teachers preparing for the day and early arriving students clustered around lockers. She made her way to the music wing, where practice rooms would be available. Finding an empty one, she set up her music stand and took out her violin, going through the familiar warm-up routine. Scales first, then arpeggios, then a section from the Mendelssohn concerto she'd been working on before the move. She was so absorbed in her playing that she didn't notice the small crowd gathering outside the practice room, window students stopping to listen, drawn by the sound. When she finally looked up during a pause, she was startled to see Rebecca among them, along with several other classmates whose names she didn't yet know. Their faces showed not the voyeuristic curiosity of viral video viewers, but genuine appreciation. One boy, a cellist she recognized from the hallway display of orchestra photos, gave her a respectful nod. Jasmine took a deep breath, then did something unexpected. She opened the practice room door. "Does anyone know where the sign-up sheet is for orchestra auditions?" she asked. Rebecca's face lit up. "I can show you. Are you really going to join?" Jasmine nodded, making her decision final. "Yes, but on my terms." As they walked toward Ms. Rivera's office, Jasmine realized she was stepping into a new chapter. Not as the girl from the viral video, not as the black classical musician, but simply as Jasmine Williams, violinist, who had something valuable to contribute on her own terms. The video would eventually fade from people's memories. Mr. Peterson would learn his lesson or not. That wasn't her responsibility. What mattered was reclaiming her love for music and refusing to let anyone else define what that should look like. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, Jasmine felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The school orchestra room was larger than Jasmine expected, with high ceilings and walls lined with acoustic panels. Instrument cases were stacked neatly in cubbies along one wall, and chairs arranged in a semicircle faced a conductor's podium. Fluorescent lights bounced off the polished wood floor, creating an almost otherworldly glow. Jasmine stood in the doorway, violin case clutched tightly in one hand, the other gripping the strap of her backpack. It was Thursday afternoon, orchestra rehearsal day. After 3 days of consideration, countless conversations with her parents, and 2 more meetings with Ms. Rivera, she had made her decision. She was 10 minutes early, but a handful of students were already setting up. A boy with glasses adjusted his cello's end pin, while 2 flautists assembled their instruments near the window. No one noticed her at first, giving Jasmine a moment to observe the dynamics of the room. Then a girl with a viola case spotted her and nudged her neighbor. Like a wave, awareness of her presence rippled through the room until all eyes turned toward the doorway. "Jasmine." Ms. Rivera emerged from her office at the back of the room, cutting through the awkward silence. "I'm so glad you decided to join us." Her warm smile eased some of Jasmine's tension. "I'm just here to observe today," Jasmine clarified, though her violin case made that claim questionable. "Of course," Ms. Rivera nodded, respecting the boundary. "Feel free to sit anywhere. We'll be working on the Dvořák String Serenade and a few pieces for the winter showcase." Jasmine chose a seat at the back, setting her case beside her chair without opening it. She watched as more students filed in, filling the room with the beautiful chaos of an orchestra warming up random scales and snippets of melody, creating a discordant symphony that somehow held the promise of harmony. Some students glanced her way with undisguised curiosity. Others seemed to deliberately avoid looking at her. Jasmine recognized Rebecca, who waved enthusiastically from the second violin section. As Ms. Rivera called the rehearsal to order, the nervous energy in Jasmine's stomach began to settle. This was familiar territory, the ritual of tuning, the rustling of sheet music, the collective breath before the downbeat. She found herself leaning forward slightly, drawn in by the familiar routine. "Before we begin," Ms. Rivera said, tapping her baton on the music stand, "I'd like to welcome Jasmine Williams, who's observing us today." She gestured toward the back, and Jasmine gave a small nod as heads turned in her direction. "Now let's tune. From Thomas, please." A boy with an oboe played a clear A note, and the orchestra began the meditative process of tuning, a ritual that never failed to center Jasmine's thoughts. Her fingers itched to open her case to join in this simplest of musical acts. The rehearsal progressed, and Jasmine found herself impressed by the orchestra's level. They weren't perfect. The first violins rushed through a difficult passage in the Dvořák, and the cellos occasionally overpowered the violas. But there was genuine musicality in their playing, a seriousness of purpose that resonated with her. As they worked through a particularly challenging section, Ms. Rivera stopped the group. "First violins, you're anticipating the beat here. You need to wait for the cue from the cellos before this entrance." The first violin section, 6 students led by a serious-looking boy with curly hair nodded and made notations on their music. "Let's try again from measure 42, Ms. Rivera said, raising her baton. The section improved on the second attempt, but still didn't quite capture the flowing quality the piece demanded. Ms. Rivera sighed. "It's still not quite right. We need more." She searched for the right word. More surrender to the phrase. Almost without thinking, Jasmine opened her violin case. The soft click of the latches drew a few eyes, but most remained focused on Ms. Rivera's guidance. Jasmine lifted her violin, quickly checking the tuning before raising her hand. Ms. Rivera spotted it immediately. "Yes, Jasmine. May I demonstrate something?" The words came out before she could second-guess them. A ripple of whispers moved through the orchestra. Ms. Rivera's face registered surprise, then pleasure. Of course, Jasmine stood, suddenly aware of the boldness of her action. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the front of the room, accepting the sheet music from Ms. Rivera. "It's this passage, right?" she confirmed, quickly scanning the notes. She had played Dvořák before, though not this particular piece. Ms. Rivera nodded, stepping back to give her space. Jasmine positioned her violin and played the passage in question, just 8 measures. But she infused them with the emotional quality the piece needed, allowing the notes to breathe and flow into each other rather than rushing toward the finish. When she finished, the room was silent. Then the first-chair violinist, the serious boy with curly hair, broke into a grin. "Oh, I get it now. You're letting the melody float above the rhythm instead of driving it forward." "Exactly," Jasmine said, relieved that he understood. Others nodded, making notes on their music. Ms. Rivera was watching her with a contemplative expression. "Would you like to join us for the rest of the rehearsal, Jasmine?" she asked quietly. "No pressure, but the first violin section could use your guidance on this piece." Jasmine hesitated, scanning the faces around her. There was no mockery, no resentment, just fellow musicians looking to improve. After a moment, she nodded. "Great," Ms. Rivera smiled. "Take any open seat in the first section." As Jasmine moved toward the first violins, the section leader, whose name she later learned was Daniel, shifted to make room for her. "Thanks for the help," he whispered as she sat down. "I've been trying to get that phrase right for weeks." The rest of the rehearsal passed in a blur of music and subtle adjustments. Jasmine found herself offering suggestions, demonstrating techniques, and gradually relaxing into the collaborative process of making music with others, something she had missed more than she realized. When they reached the end of the scheduled time, Ms. Rivera set down her baton with satisfaction. "Excellent progress today, everyone. I think we've made a breakthrough on the Dvořák." As students packed up their instruments, Jasmine found herself surrounded by orchestra members, their initial hesitation replaced by genuine musical curiosity. "How do you get that sound in the upper register? Have you played the Sibelius before? Would you be willing to help with my bowing technique sometime?" It was different from the attention that had followed the viral video. These questions weren't about the spectacle of her playing or the drama with Mr. Peterson. They were musician to musician, centered on the craft they shared. Daniel, the first-chair violinist, lingered after most had left. "So, are you joining the orchestra for real?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "Because we could really use you for the winter showcase, especially if you can play Paganini like in that video." Jasmine felt her guard rising at the mention of the video. "Is that all anyone knows about me now?" Daniel looked surprised. "No, that's not what I—" He stopped, reconsidering. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. What I meant was, you clearly have serious training and we could learn a lot from each other." He hesitated, then added, "I'm applying to Juilliard next year. Been working toward it since I was 10. "Really?" Jasmine's interest was piqued despite herself. "Yeah, it's kind of my whole life plan." He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Probably sounds obsessive." "No," Jasmine said, "I get it." And she did. Before the move, before the complications of being the talented black girl at her old school, she'd had similar dreams. Ms. Rivera approached as they were talking. "Jasmine, do you have a minute?" Daniel took the cue and excused himself, leaving Jasmine alone with the teacher. "You were remarkable today," Ms. Rivera said once they had privacy. "Not just your playing, which is exceptional, but how you worked with the other students. You have a gift for teaching." "I was just trying to help," Jasmine said, uncomfortable with the praise. "Well, help is exactly what we need." Ms. Rivera leaned against the piano. "I'd like to offer you first chair in the violin section." Jasmine blinked in surprise. "But what about Daniel? He's been working toward Juilliard." "Daniel was the one who suggested it," Ms. Rivera interrupted gently. "He recognizes your ability. And sharing first chair with you will actually strengthen his application. Collaboration is a key skill for any serious musician." Jasmine was silent, processing this unexpected turn. "You don't have to decide now," Ms. Rivera continued, "but I hope you'll consider it. The orchestra needs your talent, and I think you might need the orchestra too." As Jasmine walked home that afternoon, her mind was full of possibilities that hadn't existed just days ago. The orchestra had felt like home in a way that no other part of Westridge Academy had. For those 2 hours, she hadn't been the girl from the video or the black violinist. She'd just been a musician among musicians. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How was rehearsal?" Jasmine typed back, "Good, really good." Another buzz. Ms. Rivera called. "Said you were brilliant. Dad and I are so proud of you for putting yourself out there." Jasmine smiled, then noticed another notification. An email from the principal's office requesting a meeting tomorrow morning. The subject line made her stomach clench. "Meeting with Mr. Peterson, formal apology." She stopped walking, staring at her phone. Part of her wanted to delete the email, to move forward without dealing with the man who had tried to humiliate her. But another part recognized that this conversation was necessary, not for his sake, but for hers. Her finger hovered over the accept button. Finally, she pressed it, then put her phone away and continued walking. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but today had shown her something important. She belonged in that orchestra room, violin in hand, making music that transcended all the labels others tried to place on her. And that was worth fighting for. Principal Hargrove's office smelled like coffee and old books. It was a large room with windows overlooking the school courtyard, walls lined with academic awards and photographs of past graduating classes. Jasmine sat in one of 2 chairs facing the principal's desk, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She had arrived 10 minutes early for the meeting, partly out of habit. Her mother had always stressed punctuality, but mostly to gather her thoughts before facing Mr. Peterson. Principal Hargrove had greeted her warmly, then excused himself to give her a moment. Though Jasmine suspected he was really giving Mr. Peterson time to arrive, without creating an awkward waiting situation. Jasmine's gaze drifted to a framed photo on the wall. Last year's orchestra at some competition. Trophies held high. She recognized Daniel and a few others she'd met at yesterday's rehearsal. Their faces beamed with the unique joy that came from creating something beautiful together. The door opened, pulling Jasmine's attention back to the present. Principal Hargrove entered, followed by Mr. Peterson. The music teacher looked different somehow, smaller, less intimidating than he had in the classroom. His usual confident posture was replaced by a slight stoop, and he avoided eye contact as he took the seat beside her. Jasmine noticed his hands fidgeting with the edge of his tweed jacket. "Thank you both for coming," Principal Hargrove said, settling behind his desk. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "As you know, we're here to address the incident that occurred in music appreciation class last week." Jasmine nodded but remained silent. What was there to say? Everyone in the room knew what had happened, what Mr. Peterson had tried to do and how it had backfired. "Mr. Peterson has requested this opportunity to speak with you directly." "Jasmine," Principal Hargrove continued, "before he does, I want to assure you that Westridge Academy does not condone or tolerate the kind of behavior displayed in that classroom. We've taken appropriate administrative action, and Mr. Peterson has been actively engaged in our sensitivity and bias awareness program." The formal language made Jasmine uncomfortable. It sounded like the kind of statement crafted to prevent lawsuits rather than address real harm. "Would you like to speak now, Mr. Peterson?" Principal Hargrove prompted. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and finally looked at Jasmine. The smug superiority she remembered from class was gone, replaced by something more complex. Embarrassment, certainly, but also what appeared to be genuine regret. "Jasmine," he began, his voice hoarse, "I want to apologize for my behavior in class last week. What I did was unprofessional, inappropriate, and unkind." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "It was also biased. I made assumptions about you based on prejudices that I didn't even realize I was carrying." Jasmine studied his face, trying to gauge his sincerity. Adult apologies in her experience often came with qualifiers or subtle blame shifting. She waited for the but that usually followed. Instead, Mr. Peterson continued, "Your playing was extraordinary. Truly one of the most impressive performances I've ever witnessed from a student. But that's not the point." He shook his head slightly. Even if you hadn't played a single note correctly, my behavior would have been just as wrong. Teachers should lift students up, not set them up for humiliation. The room fell quiet. Through the window, Jasmine could hear distant shouts from the physical education class on the field below. "Is there anything you'd like to say, Jasmine?" Principal Hargrove asked gently. Jasmine had thought about this moment all night, rehearsing various responses in her mind. She'd imagined herself delivering a powerful speech about prejudice and assumptions, or coldly dismissing his apology, or even breaking down in tears. But now, faced with this diminished version of Mr. Peterson, she felt none of the anger she'd anticipated. "Why did you do it?" she asked simply. Mr. Peterson looked taken aback by the directness of the question. He started, then stopped. "I could give you excuses about having a bad day or feeling challenged by a new student who seemed disengaged, but the truth is..." He took a deep breath. "The truth is that I saw a young black student in my classical music class who didn't volunteer information about her background, and I made assumptions. I assumed you couldn't possibly have the training or appreciation for classical music that I valued." His frankness surprised her. "And I was threatened," he admitted, the words seeming to cost him. "When you correctly identified the technical elements of Paganini's work, instead of being impressed by your knowledge, I felt challenged. I wanted to put you in your place." He winced at his own words. "That's not easy to admit, but it's the truth. And it's inexcusable." Jasmine absorbed this, unsure how to respond to such honesty. "Your video has been viewed over 30,000 times now," she said finally. Mr. Peterson nodded grimly. "I know, my wife showed me. Some of the comments are, well, let's just say I've gotten a thorough public education about my biases." "I didn't ask for it to be posted," Jasmine said. "I never wanted to embarrass you." "I understand that," Mr. Peterson replied. "And frankly, that makes this even worse. I tried to humiliate you publicly, and you're concerned about my embarrassment." He shook his head. "You've shown more maturity than I did." Principal Hargrove had been watching this exchange silently, but now he leaned forward. "Jasmine, you don't have to accept Mr. Peterson's apology today or ever, but I hope you know that we're taking concrete steps to ensure nothing like this happens again at Westridge." "Ms. Rivera mentioned that," Jasmine acknowledged. "The bias awareness training." "Yes, and curriculum reviews, faculty discussion, student feedback channels," Principal Hargrove elaborated. "Your situation has sparked important conversations throughout our school." Jasmine hadn't expected to become the catalyst for institutional change. It was a strange feeling, knowing that her private humiliation had somehow transformed into something potentially positive for others. "Thank you for telling me," she said to Mr. Peterson, not quite ready to say, "I accept your apology," but acknowledging his effort. "There's one more thing," Mr. Peterson said hesitantly. "I understand you've joined the orchestra." "I'm considering it," Jasmine corrected. "I've only been to one rehearsal." "Well, if you do join," he continued, "I want you to know that I've asked to be removed from the judging panel for first chair auditions and solo selections. I don't want my presence to make you uncomfortable or raise any questions about fairness." This surprised Jasmine. First chair auditions were significant. They determined who would perform solos in the winter and spring showcases, who would represent the school at competitions. For Mr. Peterson to recuse himself was a meaningful gesture. "That's not necessary," Jasmine said after a moment's thought. "If you can judge fairly now, I'd rather have things be normal." She met his eyes directly. "I don't want special treatment, either positive or negative." Something shifted in Mr. Peterson's expression. A new respect, perhaps. "I understand," he said quietly. "Thank you." As the meeting concluded, Principal Hargrove shook Jasmine's hand. "You're an extraordinary young woman, Jasmine. Not just for your musical talent, but for how you've handled this situation. Westridge is fortunate to have you." Outside in the hallway, Jasmine checked her watch. Third period had just ended, which meant she had missed half of English class. She had a pass from Principal Hargrove, but still felt anxious about walking in late. As she hurried down the corridor, she nearly collided with Daniel from orchestra. "Whoa, sorry," he said, steadying himself. "Hey, Jasmine. Missed you in English. I had a meeting with Principal Hargrove," she explained. "And Mr. Peterson." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "The apology thing? How'd that go?" "Better than expected," Jasmine admitted. "He seemed genuine." They walked together toward English class, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. "So," Daniel said, "have you decided about first chair?" "Ms. Rivera told me she offered it to you." Jasmine hesitated, then nodded. "I'm going to accept. But I'd like to share it, alternate with you for different pieces." Daniel's face broke into a grin.
Seriously?
"That would be amazing. We could work on the Vivaldi double concerto for the spring showcase." His enthusiasm was contagious, and Jasmine found herself smiling too. "I'd like that, great. I have some sheet music at home I can bring tomorrow. And maybe we could practice together sometime? My mom's always saying I need to work on my dynamics, and after hearing you play..." As Daniel continued chatting about music, Jasmine realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, she wasn't just the new girl or the viral video violinist. She was simply a musician talking shop with another musician. 6 months later, the Westridge Academy auditorium was packed for the spring showcase. Parents, teachers, and students filled every seat, programs rustling as the orchestra took their places on stage. Jasmine, dressed in the formal black attire required for performances, adjusted her violin as she sat in the first chair position. In the front row, her family beamed with pride. Her father filming with his phone, her mother dabbing at her eyes, her brother pretending to be bored while secretly paying attention. Ms. Rivera stood at the conductor's podium, her baton raised as she waited for the musicians to settle. From her position, Jasmine could see Mr. Peterson in the audience, sitting next to his wife. He caught her eye and gave a small respectful nod, which she returned. Their relationship would never be warm, but it had evolved into something workable, a mutual respect built on acknowledged mistakes and genuine growth. As Ms. Rivera lowered her baton for the first downbeat, Jasmine took a deep breath and began to play. The melody soared above the orchestra, clear and confident, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply for the joy of making music in a community that had, against all odds, become hers. The journey from that humiliating day in music appreciation class to this moment on stage had been complicated, painful at times, but ultimately transformative, not just for her, but for the school itself. New programs had been implemented, conversations about bias had become ongoing rather than reactive, and several other students of color had joined music programs they might previously have avoided. As the piece reached its crescendo, Jasmine exchanged a quick smile with Daniel, who sat beside her ready for their upcoming duet. In that moment of connection, musician to musician, human to human, she felt the final piece of herself click into place at Westridge Academy. She was no longer defined by a viral video or a teacher's prejudice or anyone else's expectations. She was simply Jasmine Williams, violinist, student, friend, playing her own music, writing her own story, one note at a time.